right out there, right at the beginning, saying, look, you want to do this, you got to do this right, you got to take the whole thing. I think that that's what he's trying to say. All right, so let's take a look here in figure 1.2 on page 5. So what are some of the reasons that the convert might not be willing to accept the oral Torah? So, number one, why would we need anything more? Why is the Bible itself, the Word of God, not sufficient? What do I need more for? Talk about that. Who's the author of the oral Torah? If it's a work of ancient rabbis, is it relevant to modern life, whatever modern means at a particular time? Weren't their ideas shaped by the knowledge and the circumstances of their times? Isn't the oral Torah filled with debates? It leaves us with an unclear guidance and with the impression that Jewish law is all a matter of opinion. Right? It's a very valid question. It's a question I think that we all ask today. Don't the debates of the oral Torah indicate that it's not divine? After all, how can there be multiple opinions in a God-given system? So here we claim that the Torah is divine, and yet in the very same breath, we say that it's a matter of opinion. So is it divine or is it a matter of opinion? Those two statements right there, right off the bat, before we understand anything, seem to be extraordinarily problematic. And finally, how do we know we have the original message? Is it possible that the oral Torah has been passed down sort of accurately for so many thousands of years? Right? So these are all questions, I think, that really they need an answer. They needed an answer for the convert. They need an answer for us today as well. And hopefully through the course of the next few weeks, we will touch upon and address each one of these questions. So we understand perhaps why he may have said, I'd like to hear about the written Torah and forget about the oral. But the truth of the matter is that it might have been, if he was a little bit more thoughtful, he might have at least said, let me first find out what the oral Torah is, and then decide if I want to hear about it and to learn about it, etc. And so that's what we're doing here. We're going to first hear about what is the oral Torah. And there are a lot of misconceptions about what that is. So, as I mentioned, every single area of Jewish law that is addressed in the oral Torah, and every single area of Jewish law, that's addressed in the written Torah, cannot be understood, and surely not its practice of it, cannot be understood with some additional information that does not exist in the written form, or in the written Torah. It's impossible. And we're going to take a look at some of those things in a moment. So, what we've said so far is that the oral Torah is relevant to every single Jew. If all they do is know about Yom Kippur, or Hanukkah, or Pesach, that practice that they may know about, or may have seen, or may have heard of, that practice has been profoundly influenced, written about, described, created in a certain sense, by the oral Torah. Everybody is affected by that. And we have all kinds of various questions about it, and our course is meant to address those questions. Okay. So what is the oral Torah? What are its origins, and what is its function? Okay. Now, we're going to find that there are, and we're going to actually explore multiple categories of oral Torah and the important differences between them. Tonight, for the rest of the lesson, we're going to explore one category of oral Torah. And this category is defined in the following text, text 3. If you'll read for us, please.
Every mitzvah that God gave to Moses was given with its explanation. God would tell Moses the verse and then tell him its meaning, explanation, and all that was contained in the ingenious wording of the verse.
Okay. So this is taken from Maimonides. Maimonides gives a lengthy explanation of the development of the oral law. And this is how the oral law sees itself. Okay? The Talmud speaks about this. Maimonides codifies this in terms of a system of law. The first thing he does is, he says there is an area of oral Torah that nobody argues about. There's a particular area of the Torah that nobody argues about. This is not up for, the rabbis didn't make it up, meaning that they do not claim to have made this up. This is not legislated. They didn't come up and sit together and bring in new law like so much of what we know of the oral law. Rather, this is the basic interpretation of the mitzvah. What is the mitzvah? Okay? So we're going to, for the purposes of this, you have on page 6, you have figure 1.3. So the first category of oral law that we're going to describe is a category called received. The received category. When God told Moses the mitzvah, when he told him, you shall place it on the door of your house, what was placed, what should be written there, what is it, how you should put it there, all of those things, the basic commandment, that is in the category of received. Okay? And we're going to talk about this in a second, but that's what we're going to focus on tonight. In coming weeks, we're going to focus on different categories. By the way, is it just me, or is it sweltering in here?
No, it's freezing.
It's cold?
Oh, it's
All right.
fine.
It's just me.
It's blowing right
That's fine.
here.
You're warm? I'm having, it's that time for me. Yeah, please. A little circulation.
I have to say that I have to disagree with your premise.
Okay.
Historians look at it very differently. They say that during the Second Temple period, once the Bible was canonized, the rabbis had difficulties with written Torah. Many things were problematic. Contradictions, duplications, whatever it was. And so the oral tradition developed in the course of hundreds of years to harmonize problems or issues or whatever you want to call them. I'm not trying to be critical of it, but issues that they had to discuss to make it more pleasing, to make sense of it, and therefore the authority was granted as it came from Moses. That's all I want to say.
In 1,000 years after it was given.
Correct.
More, 1,300 years.
In other
Okay.
words,
So I am aware of this idea. I'm very well aware of it. And again, we can address it once we understand what the Torah says about itself. That others say other things about it, we know. But first we want to hear what does Torah say about itself. Then we can critique it. Then we can see, does it match up? Does it stand up to outsiders describing it their way? Okay?
or insiders.
Or insiders. There was no insiders back then that described it that way. But we'll get there. Okay. So we're going to discuss received, which now what we're talking about received, we're talking about God's explanation of the commandments. For Michael's sake, because I don't want to go through this every sentence here, I want to say that the oral Torah has multiple parts of it. So for example, we know that there's something called pshat, which is the basic explanation, the simple meaning. There's something called remez, which are something that's alluded to. Drash, which is homiletical interpretations, like something that the rabbi will just take a sermon, he'll take some kind of idea that's mentioned in the Torah, and he'll say, what can we extrapolate from this? What can we learn about this in psychology or in behavioral thing in today's day of life? We are focusing on the area of halacha. One area, the development of the oral law. Not of the entirety. We're not going to talk about the development of midrash. We're not going to talk about the development of other things. We're talking here development of law, and it's very, very critical to understand that distinction. Okay, so let's first start with one of the issues that, or actually we're going to go through 3 or 4 issues where an oral Torah is absolutely necessary the moment you have a written work. The moment you have a written work, there is an absolute necessity, as we'll see in a moment, to have a form of oral law from day one. Okay. So, let's go back to the story of the convert. So Shammai, hearing that the convert only wanted to hear the oral Torah, he said, don't waste my time, get out of here. I told you there's 2, you only want to hear 1, go find somebody else. Hillel, his colleague, and Hillel, he really felt that this convert was sincere. He really was looking for the truth. And his concerns about the oral Torah they came from a rational place. And so Hillel reacts very, very differently to this convert. Michael, if you will, text 4, please.
The first day Hillel taught him Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet. The next day Hillel reversed it. Said the man, but yesterday you didn't tell it to me that way. Hillel answered, are you not relying on me to read the written Torah? Rely on me as well for the oral Torah.
Okay. So the first point is, he says to him very simply, on the first day he showed him Aleph, he says Aleph, Beis, Gimel, the whole thing. The next day the guy came back after practicing a little bit, and he says, no, that's a Saf, that's a Shin, that's a Resh, that's a Kuf. So he said, well, time out. Does it go by the day of the week? Yesterday it's Aleph, today it's Taf, how does this work? He said, wait a second. If you relied on me to teach you how to read the words, how does one know how to read words? Imagine you came up upon a foreign language, you just see letters. You just see letters. You have no idea how to read it. Somebody needs to initiate you and to teach you how to read it. At some point there was somebody who made a language, who came up with symbols, signs, other things for themselves, and then they taught it to others. So the letters themselves, the pronunciation, what the letters are, they themselves need a teacher. And this, by the way, this goes for any language. Forget about Hebrew, forget about Torah, this goes for any language. We're going to see in a moment. We're just going to build on this. Don't worry, we're not stopping here. So the first thing is trying to bring an illustration that this problem, this issue, existed for a long time. People said, I don't believe that there's some kind of oral Torah. He says, time out, wait a second. You came to me as a teacher. You're asking what I know of the written Torah. If you believe me to teach you what it means, please trust me that there's an interpretation that goes along with it that I am going to share with you. Exactly like we're doing here. You and I. All right. So that's the first part. But with Hebrew it gets, now let's increase this 10 or 100-fold. Why? Because in English, for example, vowels are letters. And so when you learn the letters, you learn the vowels. In Hebrew, though, especially in a Sefer Torah, and that's how the scrolls were all written, the scrolls were written without vowelization. Now vowels, it means you just have consonants, and the vowels go under or above the letter, except you don't write the vowels. You don't write the vowels. The vowels is it was known what the vowelization was in virtually the entire, one or two places where there's some question, but throughout the entire Torah, the vowelization was just known. It was taught from teacher to student. And let's do a quick exercise over here on page 8. So imagine I give you the letters B, R, D, which is, by the way, very, very indicative of what would be in the Torah. Beis, Resh, Dalet, something like that. Now, if you will, just take 45 seconds. How many words can you come up with if you add vowels to the letters B, R, D? No, just add letters to this. Only vowels. Only vowels. What are some words that you can come up with?
Bird.
Bird.
Board.
Bread.
Bride.
Keep going.
Right.
Here's what I came up with here. Bard, baird, bird, braid, broad, brood, board, bread, beard, buried, brad, bread, breed, board, bride, abroad, and aboard. Right? And that's just from 3 letters. Now, in Hebrew, and this is not uncommon, I mean, in case you think I just chose 3 letters, you can do this with virtually every single word in the Torah. Bereshit bara Elokim, Eis HaShamayim ve'Eis HaAretz. You can find different words of interpreting in the beginning God created heaven and earth, depending on how the vowelization is of those words. And I'll give you some examples of this in other places. So, and for thousands of years, there's no formal placing vowels in the documents. And so the interpretation can be substantially, now usually how do we figure it out today? If you open up an Israeli newspaper, it's written without vowels. It's written without vowels. But there's contextual knowledge. What is the context? You know that chamor, the letters ches, mem, resh, it can be an Aramaic word chamar, it can mean wine, it can mean a donkey, it can mean very stringent. There's all kinds of different meanings of it. But depending on the context, we'll know. If you're drinking it, it's wine. If you're riding it, it's a donkey, right? It's context. But there are many, many words in Hebrew, in regular passages in the Torah, that are absolutely impossible to decipher. They could literally have two different meanings, and they would be equal. Those two meanings, without an oral knowledge of what this means, completely possible to mean either one. Let's take an example. Text 5, page 8, if you will, Bobby.
The choicest of the first fruits of your soil you shall bring to the house of God. You shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk.
Ches Lamed Beis. What does Ches Lamed Beis spell? What else does it spell? Chalev. Chalav and chalev, and these are two words that are both used in the Torah. One of them means do not cook a kid in its mother's milk. The other one is in its grivenus. Don't cook it in the fat taken from the animal. And there are certain fats that are kosher, certain fats that are not kosher. How do I know what the meaning of this is? It's not. We didn't use the translation here today. Of course, everybody knows this is a very famous passage. It's repeated 3 times in the Torah. Everybody knows this. But
there's a word, imo, ina, so it's obviously milk.
so again, over here, context. Because it says imo, because it says it's mother, so we know that the mother's milk. It still could be chalev. It still could say, and by the way, this is part of the reason why we brought the previous part of the text. The choicest of your fruits, of your soil, you shall bring to the house of the God. That's correct.
The baby.
Correct.
So that's what says halal.
Very good. Excellent. So here we have a Hebrew teacher. Let me give you another example. We just read this last week. It says, Vitam'a, the word is shin. This is just for you. If anybody else knows Hebrew, well, I'll tell you, you're not going to find it in your book. It's in Vayikra. We just read it 2 weeks ago. Vayikra, it says it's as follows. Vitam'a, and the word is shin vez ayin yud mem, kinidata. Vitam'a, shin vez ayin yud mem, kinidata. Right, shin vez ayin yud mem. Take your pen. Right there, right there. Ayin yud mem. Anyone else a Hebrew speaker over here? Shiv'im. 70, right? Except that the meaning is not shiv'im, it's shvu'ayim. And it could be either one. But you...
No, because you missed
The vav. Except that it's...
and to you.
Except that that's the oral Torah on it. So that's exactly the point. You can write it maleh, chaser, etc. So again, that's one of these that I can throw at you another couple of them. So this is all over the place in the Torah. Everywhere in the Torah. So in other words, Judaism as we know it, in any form. By the way, the King James edition, in terms of its translation and everything, profoundly influenced by the oral Torah. Profoundly influenced. But even the basic reading of the words. Okay, so we did the letters. Hillel talks about the letters. Now we're talking about the vowels. And multiple places, in virtually every paragraph in the Torah, you can find applications of this where it could mean different things. If not for the fact that today we know the vowels. Let's go further into this. What about punctuation? Again, there's no punctuation. The only thing we have is certain places where there's a paragraph break. That's all there is. It's just one long run-on sentence. Okay? Learning exercise 2 on page 9. Woman without her man is nothing. You agree or disagree with this statement? Anyone?
With which one?
Woman without her man is nothing.
With which one of 2 statements I have?
What are the 2 statements that you know?
Woman, without her, man is nothing.
Very good. Very good.
A woman without her man is nothing.
So it depends where you place the punctuation. Excellent. So one form of punctuation is to make a comma after woman, and without her, comma, or woman, period, without her, comma, man is nothing, exclamation point, right? That's the real way to punctuate that sentence. Or, woman without her man is nothing. You know, that's awful, right? Now, I'll give you an example of this, an actual example, and again, there are multiple examples of this in every paragraph in the Torah. The punctuation is critical to the understanding of the verses. Punctuation, by the way, is what we call trope. The trope is punctuation. It's a way of reading the Torah, and it gives meaning to we have commas there, we have semicolons, we have all kinds of ways of breaking up the words to help us understand the meaning.
But the understanding of the word itself is also important. Traditional Judaism defines tevashel as cook, but it's been suggested, based on its similarity to another pasuk in Breshit, where the word is hivshilu ashkaloteha,
That
the
they are
ripening, that the word tevashel really means to ripen, and it changes the entire meaning of the pasuk. The three psukim that precede this deal entirely with the speed at which you have to bring your offerings. And the last sentence, if you interpret it that way, means something totally different.
What does it mean?
You have to bring the kid before it's weaned from its mother's milk.
Okay. So, again, we're talking about how this has what we know of today as Judaism. The point we're making here is that whether you read it this way or that way, you have to go with a tradition. You have to go with an interpretation. Whether the interpretation is this or the interpretation is that, but if we want it to be a meaningful document, there must be an oral accompaniment.
Right.
That's once again,
Even
stop.
by the time of Devarim, when it's written the third time, the meaning is very clear.
So 1 second. So as you'll see in a moment, you're starting slowly to dig your hole. Just wait.